Welcome to In Pursuit of Truth. This is your host, Sir Patrick Mack. We're back once again, and this time with 5% more pursuity. No, I'm just kidding. It's probably the same amount of pursuity as all my other shows. I'm back though, and I have a few things I want to talk at you about. So grab your coffee, fist bump your neighbor, stretch those hammies. You know what to do. Maybe nod to your neighbor and say, hey, it's been a hot minute since we had a little fellowship. And gather the kids around. Say, hey, young folks, gather around ye old hearth for some fellowship. Maybe you'll freaking learn something. Let's go. All right, first things first, I want to talk a little bit about some of these posts from those guys. And if you've had a hard time reading some of these posts from those guys, it might be because some of these aggregate sites are down. We normally read from those guys, Qmap.pub, but today we are reading from those guys, alerts.pub. Look at the screen if you need to see it. Those guys, alerts.pub. And we're not going to go through them all, but I do want to start here at 4657. This is from the other day on the 10th. Debates. Number 1, Biden camp will find excuse, reason to terminate. Number 2, Biden camp will be provided the questions ahead of time. Number 3, Biden camp will be provided the questions ahead of time and assistance in the form of a special communication device. Okay, well, we've seen most all of this already, right? We've seen Biden getting some real softballs, and apart from him being in the basement, when he does come out, it does look like he's either being fed something into his ear. Something seems to be off, and they're shooting him full of juice just to keep this guy upright, right? It doesn't really look like he's going to make this run, and it's really rather sad in a way, but that seems to be the case. So does all of this lead up to number 1, the excuse and reason to terminate? Well, I don't think it would surprise any of us at this point, right? I think a lot of us are of the thought that Biden is simply a placeholder for somebody else. Now, who that's going to be to step in, it's hard to say. Whether or not Kamala is actually going to take over. Could be. He's already announced that she's the vice, so she would be the next logical choice. Whether or not there would be another running mate, or whether they're going to try and win and then do this. I mean, there's a lot of different options that could happen. This could be Stacey Abrams in Pursuit of Truth, right? This could be Hillary Clinton step in. This could be Big Mike. I think we've all got a ton of theories, right? Fact of the matter is we don't really know, but I think we all suspect that Biden himself is not going to make the next round. And President Trump knows this too. The way he talks about him, you can see clearly. He keeps saying he doesn't even know where he is. He's very full aware of what's going on with Joe Biden. So what does that all mean? Well, to be honest with you, I'm not really sure, but I think we've already seen 2 and 3 in play, and I think number 1 should be coming up shortly. Let's move on for now. This is what I do want to talk about, and we've talked about this before. 4658. Facebook and Twitter is using DARPA-provided software to censor and restrict picture content using matching, think reverse image, upload 1 to find, locate all, cycling 5 seconds. Okay, so they're using this reverse image search to find out where your memes are coming from, and then they can block and ban you. We knew this was coming. This was a project from General McChrystal, who sort of announced this a few months ago. As a matter of fact, we did a few episodes on this. Those guys say adapt and overcome, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. That's what I want to get to, so let's move on to the next one. In 4659, we get a little banter with an anon here who says easiest way is to recrop an image slightly smaller or slightly larger. Another is to just place pixels within the pictures as one black pixel. Usually fools software like this unless it's more advanced. Okay, so I think probably many of you understand what we're talking about here, and if you don't, it's okay. But what we're talking about are memes, and not just memes, anything that you're really trying to put out on the internet. There is software now, active software, and we're talking a lot about this. There's been a number of channels talking about this, and we've all been wondering warning about this for quite some time, especially since the announcement of General McChrystal. But this was coming. We just didn't know in what form. Now they're trying to read these memes. They're trying to read everything. So we have to make these things more complicated. We have to add more levels. We have to change up the way we do things. And so for those who are more technically minded, they could probably give you a better explanation of that. But that's the general idea. Now, those guys says more advanced. Consider black corner box, 20%, insert top, bottom, left, right. Sniffer cannot distinguish at this time. Okay, so it sounds like if you stay in the corners, at least for now, that might put them off. So let's take a look at that. In 4660, we see a couple of templates here. This first one appears to be correct, and it looks like the black places are the places that they're sniffing out. And so if you still get your messages in the middle and here, it is less likely to get sniffed out, but I'm assuming these are the black areas, meaning that's where they're going to catch it. Now, this first one appears to be kind of a similar thing, except they are using the centers instead of the corners of the edges. And then says 1 or 2. Those guys say 1 is sufficient at 20% of total. Okay, so we're going to look at that again, and I will post this on Twitter, and I'm actually going to do my own version and try a few things out. I'm going to probably do some video ones, maybe GIFs and things like that. So if you're following me on Twitter at IPOT1776, and if you're not, I don't know why you're not. I'm an awesome follow. You should be following me over there. That's a completely separate topic, but get on it. I'm going to be making some sweet ones over there in video form. That'll be a great way for me to share some of them with you. You guys can take them and do what you want. But here is an example here, thanks to John Cutard III, who made this one right here. And as you can see, they put a little artistic flair in the corners there to draw the eye. Pretty clever. So this might give you some ideas. You guys can let me know what you think, but I think best to just go ahead and try them out. We get a little bit more banter here in 4661. Given this information, how much time we have before they adapt, those guys say 2 to 4 days. They will deploy a centralized picture frame approach next. Instructions to follow. Okay, so eventually we'll get it, whether we get it from the mod of the board, I'm assuming, modification, I'm guessing that's MOD. You guys can let me know what you think, but I'm guessing that we will get some instructions, very much like the template that we just got, as to how to construct memes. So I hope that makes sense for those of you who are maybe struggling to understand that. We get a little bit more discussion on this in 4662, where an Anon says, would a in the corner do the same trick? Those guys say negative regarding artifact insertion. 4-corner direct center approach. Okay, so I have to admit I was going back and forth on this for a little bit too, trying to figure this out, and some of you may even still disagree with this as to whether or not we were supposed to avoid those areas or use those areas, and it looks like I wasn't the only one thinking this, but we get a little bit more clarification in the next post. 4663 and Anon says, so a circle within the square, and those guys say program hits 32 identifying structural points. If 20% of those points fail to hit, program passes as safe. 5-5, meaning do you got it loud and clear? So I think at the end of the day, there's a lot of different approaches that we can take towards this, but I think what they're trying to share here is that we need to use up about 20%. We need to break up some of the space so that these programs, as they're scanning your memes, will have a more difficult time of detecting that. So again, for those of you who understand Photoshop and the use of layers and things like that, yes, I'm sure that that helps, but it seems like this is directional, or at least with this new program, this is the approach of that. Those of you who are more experts in this field can add a little bit more down below. I'll actually leave it in a top comment for a place for everybody to go for one place if you want some trips and ticks. We're going to talk a little bit about the fires, but right now I want to skip forward to 4671, this tweet from Kevin Cork, or if you're fancy in French, you can say Kevin Corquet. That's if you're fancy. Remember when I said wake me when there are indictments and or arrests? Well, a solid DOJ source just told me to set my alarm clock. I said I'll believe it when I see it. And I wouldn't be very surprised if many of you are saying the same thing. I'll believe it when I see it. Well, President Trump had a few things to say about this in a presser the other day, and I want to take you over there, but we ain't going to watch the whole thing. So I made you montage.
Oh, it's a montage, cause we ain't trying to watch the whole dang thing now.
The election, and we haven't seen a lot out of the Durham investigation yet.
Yeah.
Where is that? And do you have confidence in the investigation?
Well, I can't tell you that yet. I have to see. I'm not involved in it. I purposely stayed uninvolved. I'm, I guess, considered the chief law enforcement officer of the country. I could be involved if I wanted to. I thought it would be better if I wasn't. I think it's better if our great attorney general handled it. He has Durham, who is a very, very respected man, and we're going to see what it is. I can't tell you that. I can tell you this. I can tell you this. They lied. They cheated. They leaked. They got caught. They spied on my campaign. Never in history has there been anything like this. And I guarantee if the roles were reversed and I was on the Democrat side, people would have been in jail at the very highest level. People would have been in jail for 2 years already. Nothing like this has ever happened. And the term would be for many, many years because it's treason, and other words can be used also.
So you think there should be more indictments as a part of this investigation?
Well, I think just on what I read in your wonderful papers, I think, and see what, just looking at the media, not even what I know. I think Comey is a disgrace to our country. I think Strzok, who just wrote a book, which is a total fake, is a disgrace. I think Page, Lisa Page, his lover, is a disgrace to our country. I think that when you look at McCabe, where his wife got $700,000 in campaign contributions from Hillary Clinton, right? And then Hillary Clinton's under investigation, and yet she paid the head of the FBI, one of the top people, but actually the head because he took over for the other guy, who fortunately I fired. I made a good move when I fired. That was a smart move because they were looking to take down this administration, duly elected administration. So I fired him. That was a great move when I fired him, because maybe if I didn't, I wouldn't be here talking to you as president. But when McCabe's wife gets $700,000 in campaign contributions when she was running for whatever office she was running from Virginia, and yet he's in charge of the investigation of Hillary Clinton. Now he says, well, I wasn't really in charge. Of course he was in charge. He was totally in charge. He knew exactly what was going on. These people got caught in probably the biggest political scandal in the history of our country. They got caught. Now, what the Durham report is going to say, I can't tell you. But if they say half as much as I already know just from seeing it, it's really an amazing thing. They got caught in the biggest political scandal in the history of our country. They were spying on their opponent's campaign. Not only spying, they were making up fake dossiers. You have the dirty dossier. They were making up the dirty, it was all made up. It was all fiction. It turned out to be fiction. And then they were using that in the FISA courts, this revered court. Well, it's not so revered anymore, because when you look at what they did and how they played it, and they hurt a lot of people, No, I think that this, without knowing anything about what Durham is going to release, the Durham report, we'll call it, or maybe it's going to be more than a report. Maybe it's going to be much more than a report. I don't know. Maybe it's a report, or maybe it's much more than that. But when I look at the things that everybody in this room knows just from reading about it from yourselves back and forth, I think it's a disgrace to our country. And I think if people don't pay a very, very substantial price, it'll happen again. And this should never, ever happen to another president. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
So there you have it. President Trump obviously knows more than he is letting on there, and you can see it in his body language all over it. Some very telling body language right there, especially when he talks about the Durham report and then kind of adds, well, there might be more than a report, and he kind of stylized the reporter there. So it seems like there would be more coming there. And remember, Durham doesn't need to release a report. He can simply go straight to indictments. But at this point, I can't help but think that there might be a report, considering everyone keeps talking about one. I would imagine this will be something for the media to mull over if he actually does release a report along with some indictments. So who would those indictments be? Well, it's hard to say, but he also mentioned Andrew McCabe and his wife, who took $700,000 for her own campaign. And of course, McCabe was in charge of the Hillary Clinton investigation. So this would lead us to these guys right here from post 4674 and 4675, where we see these stacked names of James Comey and John. He's a recruit
5 minutes.
Brennan, our boy Andrew McCabe. So is he next in line? Well, it would make logical sense, but I also wouldn't be surprised if I'm wrong either at this point. And if you notice, this was done on September 11th. It looks a lot like the Twin Towers. Yeah, that's right. So could these guys be the next in line? Well, it would make sense, but I can't help but think in order to get to James Comey and in order to get to John Brennan, you have to get through Andrew McCabe, who already had a grand jury on him. I've been telling you this for months, and it's been something that has been mentioned in the quote-unquote news, but it hasn't been made a big deal of. But there was indeed a grand jury formed. But whatever it is, has a panic, which has led to all these fires. And we're not going to talk about all these posts here, but as you can see, lots and lots of fires. And although the media would love to get you to think that this is all about climate change, this is clearly about arson, right? And here in post 4697, we see a whole bunch of names. If you go through all these links here, these are all these different cases of arson. One I did find interesting in the middle here was this Christine Comello. Comello was picked up in Spokane, Washington for starting a fire, and I have no idea if she is a relation, but I couldn't help but notice the last name Comello, as we had this story of this Anthony Comello last year who murdered Francesco Cali, and this was the guy who they ended up blaming the whole thing on QAnon. If you'll remember, he walked into court and he had a Q written on his hand. I have no idea if this is a relation. I just simply wanted to put it out there. I'm definitely not saying it's a relation, but like I said, I want to put it out there just in case anybody was able to see a relation. But as you can see, tons and tons of arson, and all of these are recent. Meanwhile, you have Gavin Newsom trying to convince us that this is all climate change. Check it out.
Is here now. California, folks, is America fast forward. What we're experiencing right here is coming to the community all across the United States of America unless we get our act together on climate change, unless we disabuse ourselves of all the BS that's being spewed by a very small group of people that have an ideological reason to advance the cause of a 19th century framework and solution. We're not going back to the 19th century. We're not apologists to that status quo. We believe in the fresh air of progress versus the stale air, emphasis, stale air, normalcy. And so that's California.
All right, I embellished that clip only slightly. President Trump had something to say about this to California fire officials. Check this out.
So I think one area of mutual agreement and priority is vegetation management. But I think we want to work with you to really recognize the changing climate and what it means to our forests and actually work together with that science. That science is going to be key, because if we ignore that science and sort of put our head in the sand and think it's all about vegetation management, we're not going to succeed together protecting Californians.
Okay, it'll start getting cooler.
You
just watch.
I wish science agreed with you.
Well, I don't think science knows, actually.
So there you go. This is beautiful. And once again, we're seeing more and more confident body language from President Trump. He's always pretty confident, but you can see he's very confident in what he is saying lately. And at the very end, he even makes this little laugh that just kind of suggests to me that he's being as patient as he possibly can with some of these knuckleheads. So we know of all these incidents of arson, and of course the media doesn't want to talk about that. They want to create this climate change narrative so that they can direct more funds into their slush fundery. Now, if you notice at the bottom of this list, we see this line right here: combat tactics, Mr. Ryan. By turning into the path of the torpedo, the captain closed the distance before it could arm itself. This is a line from the movie The Hunt for Red October. We've been talking a lot about movies as of late. My last couple of videos, we're talking a lot about movies. And like a lot of those movies, this is another Paramount Pictures film, The Hunt for Red October, featuring Sean Connery. And this is another film featuring the character of Jack Ryan. Check it out.
Torpedo bearing steady at 315. Best range 900 yards.
Torpedo impact 20 seconds.
What books?
Pardon me?
What books did you write?
I wrote a biography of Admiral Halsey called The Fighting Sailor about naval combat tactics.
I know this book.
Torpedo impact.
Your conclusions were all wrong, Brian.
10 seconds.
Halsey acted stupidly.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. Torpedo impact.
I'll be damned.
What happened?
Combat tactics, Mr. Ryan. By turning into this torpedo, the captain closed the distance before it could arm itself.
So that's it?
Not quite. Right now, Captain Tupolev is removing the safety features on all his weapons. He won't make the same mistake twice.
So there you go. It looks like those guys are implying that we are indeed taking on torpedoes, but we're trying to dodge it the best we can with our previous knowledge of their tactics. Now, if you'll remember from November of last year, this is from the Washington Examiner. They were talking about ISIS encouraging their followers to light forest fires in the United States. And this was done by a propaganda campaign, both online, but they were also dispersing flyers. But they were doing this in Europe, trying to encourage Europeans to do this. Now, if you followed my channel for a while, you may remember I've mentioned a couple of times these websites such as moveon.org, On the Move. Those guys have mentioned it as well. These kinds of websites go back to the Open Society Foundation, directly to not only George Soros, but we should really say the Soros clan at this point, because it's really the younger guys handling most of this business. But it was Soros funded. On the Move and Move On. And this helps these quote-unquote activists/terrorists go all over the world and receive funding so that they can fund their own little terrorist travels. So that would appear to be the reference to me, especially considering the fact that those guys were posting these pictures with ISIS and Antifa and showing the direct correlation there. We all know this is essentially coming from the same place. Now, in the very next post, 4698, we see Chuck Grassley. He's out there in the corner. He's going to teach us a little lesson. Check it out.
A long time ago, I showed you a developing ear of corn. You can now see that this ear of corn is developed. You can see those little dents in the corn. That means it is mature. Between now and harvest, it's a case of this ear of corn drying down from about 35% moisture now to ideally about 20% of moisture. That's the ideal time to harvest.
So there you go. Chuck Grassley giving us a lesson on how to harvest the corn for to be cut. Now, I do know there's a lot of people that think this is a James Corney reference. If you remember, there were a lot of documents that had James Comey's name changed to Corney. It could very well be possible, but I do want to mention that whenever we hear about corn, we hear it from Chuck Grassley and Devin Nunes, both Iowa guys, right? You'll remember this story. We talked about this in this video here for to be. I suggest you check out this video if you have not, but we were talking about this Chinese spy who got caught out in the corn, and actually Washington Post recently brought this story up just as recently as March. But this was a story about a Chinese spy literally caught out in a cornfield. He was bringing back modified corn to China. Now we also have the situation with the Three Gorges Dam and the massive corn purchase bought by China, biggest in history. And we also had the strange story of all these seeds being disseminated all over the world, encouraging people to plant these seeds. All very strange. So is this what Grassley is referencing? You decide. I tweeted this yesterday, and to be honest with you, it's my own fault. It's my own fault. I say, anyone know why this is in Portland? This is a picture of the USNS Mercy, and of course I got a ton of answers of the obvious. IPOT, it's in dry dock. Yeah, thanks. My own fault. I should have been more specific. So indeed, it is in dry dock, and it's been there since June. This was right after the stint with coronavirus, if you will. And it looks like it's just a regular overhaul. Looks like it got a fresh coat of paint there. Looks like possibly a new propeller, whatever is considered a overhaul, but it doesn't seem to be anything out of the ordinary. But there is a little something out of the ordinary to me. This was a contract that was awarded to Vigor Marine LLC. And although that on its own is not suspicious, it looked like this was a pretty easy contract to get, but only this company seemed to be bidding on it. Well, this is a fixed price contract at $56,450,644, and yet it was only Vigor that bid on this. Well, the reason why I thought that was a little strange is because here we have this story from journalist Andy Ngo, and he is, of course, the guy that is covering the Antifa guys and all that, Ngo exclusive. Jet Thomas, 36, has been arrested in Portland and charged with first-degree felony arson, felony unlawful use of a weapon, 2 counts of felony criminal mischief, and more. Law enforcement says Thomas tried to set up a Northwest Portland hotel gas pipe on fire. Okay, well, that's pretty vicious, right? And in searching around on this guy's social media, here he is right there flexing his guns, but it turns out that he's an employee of the Vigor shipyard. I know. Now, to be fair, Vigor is a big company. They employ a ton of people. This doesn't necessarily cast aspersions right there on Vigor. But I did find it very curious that you've got this hospital ship that was associated with coronavirus docking in Portland. Only one company bidding on it. And it looks like already we've got one of these employees. Turns out he was a little bit of a knucklehead himself. So I wouldn't want to make a sweeping accusation. I plan to look into this more, but it does seem like there could be some funky stuff going on here, at the very least with Jet Thomas, and at the very most with Vigor Shipyard. Lastly, let me leave you with this. Those guys left a link to this site called signal.org, which takes you to this encrypted messaging app. Well, there's 2 co-founders to this group, and I want to thank Amazing Polly for a couple of these screenshots here. The first one being Brian Acton. What's he acting on? 2.5 billion, I guess. Anyway, he co-founded the messaging app WhatsApp, which is wrapped up with Facebook. So I think you see where we're going with all this. The two had met while working at Yahoo. So they sold WhatsApp to Facebook for $22 billion in cash and stocks. Pretty sweet deal. Now he's got this other thing going on, Signal. And it's a foundation in which he committed $50 million to. So it sounds like he's a bit of a philanthropist, right? Well, this is supposed to be this great whistleblowing app because it's encrypted. Well, he co-founded it with this guy right here, Moxie Marlinspike, worst name ever. Stories of maniac sailors, anarchist castaways, and the voyage of the SV Pestilence. A video zine 3 friends and I made about finding a derelict sailboat, fixing it up, and sailing from Florida to Haiti. Anyway, he's also got this service called CloudCracker. That's a better name. Should have called yourself Moxie CloudCracker. Look at you. You look like a cloud cracker. Upload a hash, WPA, capture, NTLM hash, or crypt, SHA512 hash, and CloudCracker will launch a dictionary attack across a cluster of GPUs and CPUs, jobs that would take over 5 days on a contemporary dual-core desktop machine, take an average of 20 minutes on our cluster. Okay, so Moxie CloudCracker here's a bit of a genius. Well, here's the rub, though. As Polly points out, that back in July, Signal had this issue where they wanted people to use pins. Well, that doesn't sound very decentralized at all. I thought the whole idea was to encrypt everything, right? But here he is explaining it. Building apps without analytics can be a challenge, and if we want developers to do that, we need to figure out how to make it less so. For instance, one reaction here has been frustration that folks were suddenly forced to create a pin. Suddenly forced to create a pin. That sounds a lot like Facebook techniques to me. Our goal with pins is to enable non-phone number based addressing, since that will mean your Signal contacts can't live in your address book anymore. Okay, well, let me just stop right there. I think you see what's going on here. And very much like Facebook and a bunch of other apps that many of you are probably getting booted from at this time, they're doing this new encryption thing where you almost have to give them some sort of phone number so that they can send you a little pin or whatnot. But the fact of the matter is that gives them access to your phone. Now we're seeing an uptick of downloads in China of this Signal app ever since Trump banned WeChat, which was a very good idea. That is a seriously malware-ridden program. But oddly enough, it was this Moxie CloudCracker Marlinspike who was criticizing this other whistleblowing tool in 2014 called Whisper. Twitter's former security head, Moxie Marlinspike, stating the site never should have claimed it, never should have claimed to, never should have claimed to, never should have claimed to provide anonymity if it had to track users to make the app function. Okay, well, now he's being criticized himself for adding a pin, which I guess would lead to similar situation. I do think it's fair to throw in that Brian Acton was part of the hashtag delete Facebook movement. So it's really hard to say what side these guys are on, but considering their connections, I have to think that this is rather suspect. Now, another one of these apps that's making the round is this Citizen app right here. And they have another app called SafePass, developed by the tech company behind the popular but controversial safety alert app Citizen. And this is the app behind a lot of the COVID-19 tracing. If you don't know what COVID-19 is, that's the Rona, all right? That's what's been going around, just not as much as people have been saying that it's been going around. Not saying that it hasn't been going around. I'm just saying it hasn't probably gone around as much as people think it's been going around. If you're not familiar with that, maybe you could ask your kids about it. They might call it the Cove. I don't have it. Maybe you do. No offense. But this is what they were trying to get people to download. Here's how SafePass works. Users download the app and give it permission to use their phone's short-range Bluetooth signal. Then, whenever the app detects another SafePass user nearby for more than 5 minutes, it logs that user as a contact. A user who tests positive for the coronavirus can upload their test results into the app, which automatically sends out an alert to everyone logged as a contact. You've been exposed to the virus. Please get tested and isolate yourself if necessary. Okay, so I don't think I need to tell you how alarming that is, right? And this all seems to be linked to the same kind of people here. There you have it, Patriots. That's all I got for you today. As always, if you like this video, please click like, share, and subscribe. Thanks to all of you who do that already. If you're on YouTube, all my alternate links are linked down below in the video description, or you can see them pinned to my Twitter. Please join me on BitChute or Parler or whatever your preferred nomenclature may be. My email is also down below. If you've got information for me, please do not DM me on Twitter. Much appreciated. And until next time, this is Sir Patrick Mack. Stay funky.